Monday, September 9th, 2019, and it is 6:36 p.m. We are at the Board of Education building at 35353 Curtis Boulevard in Eastlake, Ohio. Mr. Parkinson, will you call the roll?
Dr. Beal? Here. Mr. Jones? Here. Mrs. Machinsky?
Here.
Mrs. Warner?
Here.
Mrs. Zimmer?
Yes. Will you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm looking for a motion so that we can adjourn to executive session to consider the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of an employee. Is there a motion?
Madam President,
Mrs. Zerman.
I make that motion.
Thank you, Mrs. Zerman. Is there a second?
Madam President,
Mr. Jones.
I'd like to second that motion.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded that we move to executive session. It is 6:37. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Parkinson, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Zern?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Dr. Beal?
Yes.
Mrs. Machinsky?
Yes.
Mrs. Warner?
Yes. Motion has carried. We're going to run to executive session. We'll be back shortly to finish the meeting. Now time for the public comment section of the board meeting. Are there any people who wish to?
Yeah, we want to
Oh,
executive
we
session.
did. We
Oh,
reconvened.
that's
We already. Mr. Perkins, are there any people who wish to speak?
Yes, Madam President.
Okay.
First one is Mrs. Linda Fulton.
Okay. And I will just read what it says in board docs about public speak, addressing the board. Attendees must register their intention to speak, which you have done already. We need to know when you come up here, your name, address, and group affiliation, if you have any. Each statement made by our participant shall be limited to 3 minutes duration. All statements should be directed to the presiding officer. No person may address or question the board members individually. The portion of the meeting during which the participation of the public is invited should be limited to a total of 20 minutes. We would like to take a moment to review our practices regarding public speaking. If you're planning to make a comment or ask a question at the board meeting, you are attending. It's a business meeting of the Wood Eastlake City Schools. We welcome comments and questions because they are being asked in a public forum. You will receive a response in a subsequent public meeting held by the Board of Education, typically the next month's meeting. Comments and questions that are in need of a response are answered during the superintendent's comment section in the next board meeting. If you want a more immediate response, please add your email or a phone number, and the superintendent will call you in the meantime so you get a more immediate response. So, with that being said, our first person is Linda.
Me? Under full time.
Linda Fulton.
Where do I go?
Right up front, Linda.
You guys don't have microphones.
It's kind of hard to hear.
Okay, my name is Linda Fulton, and I'm really with the North Coast Lions. Today we did eye screening at Jefferson for the kindergartners, but in the process of figuring out the whole schedule, we had heard, and I want to know if this is true, that Dr. Beal has a clinic within the school system. Is this true? Some kind of clinic?
It is not true, but it is not true.
Okay, all right. So that was my main question was going to be whether or not he was being paid for it or getting money for it. And I was going to say that was a conflict.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks for doing your eye screening for the kids. That's awesome. Next person?
Mrs. April Spiegel.
Spiegel.
Speak. Sorry.
Good evening, Madam President and board members. I'm here,
April, could you say your name and address and
April E. Spiegel, 441 East Overlook Drive, Eastlake. Also used to live off of 346. Been here 40 years.
thank you.
I'd like to remind everybody what the meaning of memorial means. A memorial is something that is designated, designed, and tribute to a person for a memory. I was told that my daughter's tree was cut down, 22 years big. I saw it this spring, it bloomed beautifully. Through Facebook, media, people have been responding to me since I put it on Facebook and wanted to know how this could happen. My daughter was an honor student, a cheerleader, very honored. And my problem is the memorial was in front of the school. It had a big wall that said North Memorial Gardens. Also on the grounds were bricks. Some of those bricks went back to World War II. And the people that had those bricks paid for them. Now, my concern is none of the members have notified any of the memorial families. So all of the memorials from South, North, and Longfellow have been destroyed, removed, whatever, without the family's knowledge. I want to know why. I want to know who did it, and how could they? Now, they said that they couldn't get a hold of us because the old, building burnt down. Well, my daughter had a plaque in front of the tree. There are 2 hornets in the whole Willoughby Eastlake County. If they would have looked that up, just took the plaque and looked it up on the white pages or on Google, they would have got my ex-husband and my son. Yes, they would not have gotten me. But somebody should have been notified. Now, I know people have lost people. You should know what it feels like. She was a 17-year-old girl. It doesn't matter. But there's other families. I remember living by Longfellow when a young boy died of cancer. When a young boy who died on my street from an ice cream truck. They planted trees. Those were children. How could you not notify families? And don't say you did, because you did not. And the last thing is, there was ways of finding out through the media, through Facebook. She was well known, and I just think it's really sad, inconsiderate, and I cannot believe my daughter, who loved this school, could be honored this way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Speaker.
Yes, TV too, and I'll keep it up until I get the answers.
Mr. Parkinson, is there anyone else?
Yes, Mrs. Warren, there's Mr. Dayton.
Black?
Your board, I appreciate that. My comments will take 3 minutes. And I'm here to speak on behalf of myself. I live on Aspenwood Lane, Willoughby, Ohio, and as well as a group, citizens group called Ohio Citizens Defending the Constitution. 4 points. The topic is the importance of vaccine choice. And I have 4 points. Number 1, the vaccine industry, hospitals, doctors, administrators are held harmless from civil suit from any injury lawsuit as a result of the 1986 Childhood Vaccine Act. This violates both the U.S. and the Ohio Constitution. You unknowingly are waiving your right to a jury trial. You must present your case against a federally appointed master There's no jury, no rule of equity. It's a rigged system that favors the vaccine industry. Even if the master awards money, it's paid out of taxpayer funds. Point 2, virtually all vaccines do not evaluate for carcinogenic, mutagenic, or infertility effects. Many of the most growing problems today, cancer, infertility, autoimmune diseases, and allergies, are not taken into consideration in their evaluation of vaccine safety. Yet as stated above, they're held harmless from civil suit should their vaccine cause one of these life-threatening injuries. Point 3 of 4 points. Viruses used in vaccines can be combined with harmless substances to create an unnatural autoimmune response, such as the infertility effect of combining the tetanus virus with the HCG hormone. This was shown when the Kenya Conference of Catholic Bishops showed that the government-enforced tetanus vaccine was laced with the infertility-causing combination of tetanus and HCG. HCG is a natural pregnancy hormone. The combination causes the immune system to be tricked into thinking that the natural HCG hormone is a virus, thus causing the person's own immune system to attack the pregnancy. I, by the way, will submit evidence to all my documentation supporting this for your future consideration. If this can occur from this combination, this infertility effect, how many other possibilities exist to cause your immune system to react to something harmless? Point 4, Ohio law protects the parent's right to choose. Under the ORC, it states, I won't state the number, a pupil who presents a written statement with the pupil's parent or guardian in which the parent or guardian declines to have the pupil immunized for reasons of conscience, including religious conviction, is not required to be immunized. We urge you to support the parent's right to choose for reasons of conscience or any other reason. I'll leave a copy of this presentation and my sources for your review and hope to have further dialogue in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Black. Mr. Parkinson.
Mr. Carl Spiegel?
I'd like to donate my 3 minutes to Mrs. Spiegel. She's got more.
There's nothing in your minutes, there's nothing in your policy.
I believe you could speak again on the same topic when everybody else has spoken if we haven't used the 20 minutes.
Well, his name was called.
Okay, we'll let it go today. Sure. 3 more minutes, 3 more minutes.
Sorry.
That's okay, don't be sorry, it's okay.
Okay, my question is, I read your minutes in the last 2 years. I watched your videos for the last 2 years of your minutes. Nothing was ever stated. It always said update of the construction. But nothing was ever stated what you were going to do with the memorials, if you knew about them. My other question is, you have a policy, 7,000, number 7450, that says you keep inventory of all your equipment at each facility. But it's funny, it doesn't include memorial plaques, trees, or anything. I want to know why. Why isn't it part of the equipment that, or items that are on your property? And each school should have their own listing of what's on their own property. So even if the files were burned in the old building, each individual site should have had their own survey inventory of what was on their site. I want to know why it was still missed. And the last thing is, I was on TV, I know maybe some of you knew it on Fox News, and I was responded to by the superintendent of Eastlake and Willoughby Eastlake, noticing that he said that he had notified the family members of Vanessa Horna.
That's not true. That's not true.
I have the write-out from Fox News.
No.
That's what I want clear, because
I
you never
have never
did.
been asked by the media. Never. That's a
That
untrue
day they
statement.
went, when I was interviewed.
That's not a true statement.
Okay.
It's okay.
That-
Keep your dialogue going, I mean, not the dialogue, but keep your questions coming.
Okay, and I just wanted to know why it was stated that way, but if you say it wasn't, I will get a hold of Fox News. Because my daughter's tree's gone. And I will keep up with this because I know other members, other families that are hurting as bad as I did. The hole opened again, I hope you know that. The hole that I have lived with for 22 years. And I love seeing her tree. It was wrong. And I want to know who was the arborist and who gave the permission to cut it. Thank you.
Mr. Carpenter.
There's one last speaker, Mrs. Warner, and Mr.
Bud Moore, 36105 Chardon Road, Willoughby Hills. Can I answer questions from last week? Because I never got a response from
Yes,
last week.
it's on the agenda, it comes up with the superintendent's comments.
Okay. I just got one more question. Did they ever ask you if you sent the match from the last fire?
Excuse me, that is unacceptable.
I'm just joking with the gentleman.
Mr. Moore, that's not something that's.
Okay, all right.
Thank you,
I mean, they never did find out who the fire started, right?
that's right.
Okay. I'm just asking.
Any other public comments, Mr. Ferguson?
No, Mrs. Warner.
Thank you. I'm looking for a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting August 12th.
Madam President,
Mrs. Krasinski.
I make that motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Madam President,
Mrs. Zern.
I will second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes for the meeting of August 12th, 2019. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Parkinson, would call the roll.
Mrs. Krasinski. Mrs. Zern.
Yes.
Dr. Beal. Yes. Mr. Jones. Yes. Mrs. Warner.
Yes, motion is carried. I'm now looking for a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting August 20th.
Madam President,
Mr. Jones.
motion to approve item 2B, approval of minutes of August 20th, 2019.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Is there a second?
Madam President,
Dr. Beal.
I second that motion.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes of the meeting August 20th, 2019. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Parkinson, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Jones.
Yes.
Dr. Beal. Yes. Mrs. Zern.
Yes.
Mrs. Krasinski.
Yes.
Mrs. Warner.
Yes, motion is carried. It's now time for the treasurer's report.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. First item for your consideration is the financial report ending August 31st, information around Exhibit A. Item B for your consideration are the amended appropriations. That information can be found under B. Item C, amended certificate of estimated resources. This is for the county auditor's office. That document can be found under C. The next item for the board's consideration, which does require a separate vote, this is a resolution to refinance part of the district's debt. This is related to the tax issuance series 2012, where we are projected to save nearly $275,000.
You have heard the treasurer's recommendation. What is the board's pleasure?
Madam President,
Mr. Jones.
Madam President, I motion to approve item 3D, resolution providing for the issuance of sale of bonds at the maximum aggregate principal amount of $4,890,000 inclusive refunding and lower interest costs of certain other sewer districts energy and conservation program bonds series 2012, which were issued to pay costs of installations, modifications, and remodeling of sewer buildings to conserve energy, authorizing and directing the call for optional redemption of refunded bonds, authorizing the execution of a bond registrar agreement and a bond purchase agreement with respect to the refunding bonds, and an escrow agreement with respect to the refunding of the refunded bonds, and authorizing the preparation, use, and distribution of an official statement related thereto.
Well done, Mr. Jones. Is there a second?
Madam President,
Dr. Beal.
I second that motion.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded that we approve 3D, and I'll just to the first few lines of resolution providing for the issuance and sale of bonds and maximum aggregate principal amount of $4,890,000 for the purpose of refunding a lower interest cost to certain of the school district's energy conservation equipment funds. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Ferguson, will you call the roll?
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Dr. Beal?
Yes.
Mrs. Brzezinski?
Yes.
Mrs. Zerman?
Yes.
Mrs. Moran?
Yes, motion is carried. Mr. Parkinson?
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. The next item for consideration is 3E. This is the same refunding, except this applies to the school district's bonds. With this particular refunding, I'm expecting to save the school district over $1.6 million. This does require separate funding.
Thank you, Mr. Parkinson. You have heard the treasurer's recommendation. What is the board's pleasure?
Madam President,
Mrs.
I
Brzezinski.
make a motion to approve item E, a resolution approving and authorizing a sixth supplemental lease purchase agreement and related documents, providing for refinancing the cost of the construction, enlarging and other improvements, furnishing and equipping and the lease and eventual acquisition of facilities for school district purposes, and authorizing and approving other related matters.
Thank you, Mrs. Brzezinski. Is there a second?
Madam President,
Mrs. Zerman.
I will second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded that we approve item 3E, a resolution approving and authorizing the sixth supplemental lease purchase agreement and related documents providing for refinancing the cost of the construction, enlarging another improvement, furnishing and equipping, and the lease and eventual acquisition of facilities for our school district purposes, and authorizing and approving other related matters. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Perkinson, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Brzezinski?
Yes.
Mrs. Zerman?
Yes.
Dr. Beal?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Moran?
Yes. Motion has carried. Mr. Parkinson.
Thank you, Madam President. Next item for the board's consideration are purchase orders and blanket certificates. The following purchase orders and blanket certificates are listed under exhibit, excuse me, under exhibit B for my board consideration. This is part of the consent agenda. I'm sorry, item 3G, advance of funds. There are 5 advances that I'm requesting from the Board of Education. That's the food service fund, the state grant, and the rest are federal grants. Item 3H, transfer funds again, the amount of $50,000 into the employee benefit donation fund. Next up are transfer funds, and this is required to close accounts. The Auditor State's Office requires that if any accounts are to be closed, the transfers have to come through the general fund, because under law, the only fund allowed to transfer funds is the general fund. So those funds are listed for reconciliation. Item J is closing of additional funds. These are student activity grants. Again, the funds have to be moved into the general fund and then from the general fund to the general fund. Item K for your consideration. Student activities, purpose, goals, and proposed budgets. There are 2 for your consideration. Item L, there is 1 grant. This is the Deal Foundation in the amount of $10,000. Item M, this is the sale of buses. These buses are no longer in use. They have been replaced by Peterman. Eventually, we'll get to the point where the district does not own any buses, and they will all owned by Peterman. These buses will be listed on a public auction site and then eventually sold. And lastly, for the board's consideration, number 3N are gifts and donations. There were 7 generous individuals and organizations that generously donated to the school district, and the details can be found under our those conclude my report.
Thank you, Mr. Parkinson. It's now time for item 4, the superintendent question and answers report. Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Madam President. The first speaker last week was Melissa Toppings. Her questions pertain to safety and going to school at Longfellow Elementary. What was explained was that all construction equipment would be fenced off in a contained area. It was. It's still not completely done. The main entrance to the school is still not done because we have to move the fire hydrant. and there is a water basin that is, you can't see, but it's a huge metal steel basin. That has to be handmade essentially, and then shifted down. Otherwise, you would run into a telephone pole in the middle of that exit. So we kept additional personnel there, and there were no incidents for Longfellow Elementary School at the start of school. Mr. Moore asked a couple of different questions, but I tried to summarize what I think his main question which I believe were two basic questions. Why did the district take a nosedive? He's in reference to academic scores, and how will you help students at the bottom? Or essentially what I believe his questions were. That was followed with a presentation, if you recall, by Gina Kevrin last week. The district in 2013, 14, and 2015, our index score rose each school year. In 2014, we topped 100 on our index score, which was the first time in school history. It rose again the following school year, and then the new testing cycles began, and all school districts across the state took significant nosedives. We fell, where we were and where we fell is about the middle of the pack, which is where we were previous, which is where we are now. Is that acceptable and where we want to be? Absolutely not. That's not where we want to be. And then, which is a good segue into what are we doing to improve upon those scores. Creation of pacing guides, higher standards, consistent instruction. Students need to master the standards. Schools are consistent across the district in our approach. Adjustments are made at the end of each year. Common assessments, which we created, are based on higher standards, and those quality benchmarks are given across the entire school district to all tested grade levels. That information is used to drive instruction to hopefully improve test scores. Community engagement has been a big piece of our strategy as well. We had kids first night for students entering kindergarten to help acclimate them and segue them into school. We've done reading across the district. We've introduced classes from Lakeland, University of Akron, to our career technical program, which I believe no one's invested in career technical education to the extent that Willoughby Eastlake has invested. And we currently house over half of 11 school districts consortium programs are housed here in Willoughby Eastlake. We had a significant emphasis on reading and writing in the classrooms across the district, and our scores rose categorically, which we shared last week, significantly in reading and writing. So while Mr. Moore's question is legitimate, I believe we are doing everything we can to improve those scores, and the numbers emphasize or illustrate that that our strategy is effective.
Well, why did we drop?
Well, we dropped in 2016, 2017 for two reasons, mainly. Previously, the cut score, in other words, the score a student had to achieve, it varied from test to test, but it was essentially right around 50%. So the state had historically said if a student gets 50% correct, they're proficient. Then 75% of those kids had to hit that 50% mark and you would get your point and drive your index score. In 2016, 2017, that changed to students, instead of having to get 50% of the questions correct to be proficient, they now have to get 75% of the questions to be correct. And instead of 75% of the students needing to hit that mark, it's now 80% of our students need to hit that mark. So what happened was school districts across the entire state, to include some of the highest performing school districts in the state, all nosedived. We nosedived, if you saw it graphed out, it looks like it's here and the whole state does this. And now the state's just starting to adjust to these tests, these new realities, and we're starting to move back up. But it's gonna be
My
adjourned.
question is, are we not,
But this is not a dialogue, this is a public meeting of the Board of
but
Education.
if
So
he's not answering the question, I gotta know the answer. That's what we're here for.
you can speak to him later, this is not that kind of dialogue.
Now, what are you people here for? You're here to work for us, and we're trying to ask questions, and we're trying to get to the bottom of the answers. If you're not here to help us, and you're not here to work with us, then we don't need you people. Don't you understand that? The whole board sucks up here, including everybody.
Would you like to leave, please?
I can. And damn it, you people should be out of here point blank, every goddamn one of you. Every one of you. Right from the top on down. Because you're not doing your
Mr.
job.
Moore? this
I'm
is-
gone.
Thank you.
And everybody here knows that you should be out of here. And point the finger right from the top on down.
Well,
Okay, so we have one more, I believe Mr.
Yes.
Blograve got some answers in an email, but you can certainly,
I think John knows what answer, correct?
Madam President, may I comment?
this is not a time for comments, so I'm asking you if your questions were answered. I
I'll
did see
turn
them.
it over to you, Bill, if you can do the best.
See if Mr. Parkinson answers your
So,
questions.
yes, Mr. Belgrave spoke at the last board meeting, and I did send him an email the next day at 2:59, where I indicated to Mr. Belgrave, thank you for your time and questions presented at last night's meeting. With respect to your first question, the Ohio Department of Education requires that renewal levies be removed from line 102, 101, 102, 105. What Mr. Belgrave was asking was why those line items decreased significantly. And my response was, when you have renewal levies, the Ohio Department of Education asks that those dollar amounts be removed from the top, and then they get put into lines 1101 and 1102. Mr. Belgrave asked about line 102 and assumed that that was related to our TPP reimbursements. Line 102 actually is a combination of two different taxes. It is the personal property tax, which is no longer collected, and it's also the personal property tax related to public utilities, which we do still collect. So line 102 just reflects the collections we get from public utilities. The TPP reimbursements are actually reported on line 105. Line 105 is a combination of two different things: homestead rollback reimbursements and TPP reimbursements. And that's what that line indicates. I indicated to Mr. Blograve that the TPP reimbursement explanation can be found on the Department of Education's website, and they have a very good description of that. I also indicated to Mr. Blograve that our reimbursements from fiscal 19, which is $889,000, will go down to zero by fiscal 2023. For comparative purposes, the district collected $8,279,000 in fiscal 11 from these reimbursements. I also indicated to Mr. Blograve that levies, when they are passed during any point in the calendar year, do not begin new collections until the following January of the new calendar year. So, for example, if we pass a levy in 2017 for a new levy, January of 2018 is when we start collecting new money from levies. And I referred to him to Ohio Revised Code Section 5705.03. Lastly, Mr. Belgrave asked about expenditures and why the expenditures were low in fiscal 17 and 18, but were not the same for the upcoming budget. I indicated to Mr. Belgrave that we do appropriate for the 4%. The prior years were lower than 4% because we did not spend what we had budgeted for those years. And the reason we budget for a 4% mark in that particular year was to account for unknown costs, special education, broken pipes, building maintenance issues, bus maintenance issues, so on and so forth. So things like that don't occur, we actually spend less than what we appropriate. Those are my comments to Mr. Blograve.
Thank you, Mr. Ferguson, for reviewing that. I would suggest to anyone that has any questions about anything, money that has to do with our school district, to give Mr. Parkinson's office a call and spend some time with him. He has wonderful Excel spreadsheets, that are very self-explanatory, and he can help all of us understand better. So that's one of the things we are talking about, is having, just like a professor, open hours with Mr. Parkinson, and he is more than willing to sit with you and explain things. School finance is something, a different animal. So please take advantage of that if you have questions. It's now time for the levy report.
Madam President, Bill and I are going to do this together. It's pretty specific in nature. And it is, without question, the most difficult thing we have to do as a superintendent, as an administrative team, is prepare this. So we've been working on this for several weeks. These are recommendations to the school board. There are 3 phases. Phase 1's been enacted already. We'll cover that in detail. Phase 2 would be should a November levy fail. Phase 3 would be if a March levy were to fail, and then some just general information. But we want to cover, why does the district need a levy? Has the district been fiscally responsible? What would be the effects of a November levy failure? And what makes a vibrant community? So those are the 4 questions that we're going to try to address here. And the 5th, and of course, probably the most pressing question, or at least partially, or certainly an important question, is what would the levy cost me? So why does the district need a levy? There are 2 reasons. I'm going to turn it over to Bill, and he can explain both of these, if you will, please, Mr. Parkinson.
I just briefly mentioned TVP a few moments ago. So back in 2005, under the Taft administration, the state of Ohio did away with the tax rate related to basically furniture, fixtures, and equipment, and implemented what is referred to as commercial activity tax. At that time that deal was made between the governor and the General Assembly, they agreed that school districts would be made whole. So whatever we were collecting at that point in time, we would continue to collect going into the future. As I indicated, we used to collect $8.27 million from that reimbursement for the state of Ohio. Fast forward to the Kasich administration. Strickland didn't do anything. It was untouched under Strickland. Kasich came into office and he started to phase out this reimbursement. In his second term in office, he phased them out more quickly, far more rapidly. And now we are collecting $597,000 out of that 8.27, and by fiscal 2023, we will collect 0. So there's a significant loss of dollars that are not coming into the school district at this time. So the other piece to our funding issue is state funding for we are considered a capped school district. What does that mean? That means that the funding formula is not allowed to operate as it should. So we are capped at 3% growth. If the funding formula may say we should get 5% growth, or 6 or 7% growth, but because the state of Ohio has a cap in place, we are limited to 3%. I think I calculate we lose about $3 to $4 million a year as a result of that cap. So that's another issue with state funding.
And there are approximately 109 out of 614 school districts that are capped. So the other impact is House Bill 920. I know you've heard it, but it still lingers. House Bill 920 was passed in 1976 as a result of runaway inflation that was occurring in 1976. At that time, inflation was at about 20%. For homeowners, at least on paper, what was happening to the value of your home on paper? It was rising, right? It was rising rapidly on paper. Now, you actually couldn't sell it for that, but on paper it was rising. Until 1976, what rose as your property value rose? At that time, tax collections to schools also rose in kind. So while the general economy was doing poorly, schools were flush with cash until 1976. So the law then said, House Bill 920 was introduced that said, whatever your property value collects at the time of passage, it stays frozen at that dollar collection amount in perpetuity. Does not increase. So what I would submit to you, I think everyone would agree, now we can argue about at what rate expenses should rise, I concur, but I think we would all agree that expenses will rise. Fuel will increase, cost of healthcare will increase, cost of electricity, et cetera, will increase. But voted revenue stays frozen. Eventually, that axis will cross. Ours has been compounded by the fact that we're capped and compounded by the fact that we lost TPP. We went 8 years without new money for general operating, which is the longest run in school history. And that's where we find ourselves right now. You want to talk about our 5-year forecast?
So the district's current 5-year forecast shows our cash balance is significantly declining. And why is that? Our property taxes, as Steve indicated, are flat. It does not matter if Ryan Homes comes in and builds 1,000 homes. Yes, all those people start paying taxes, but everybody else's taxes go down, so the district collects exactly the same amount of money. If Amazon were to build their world headquarters inside our borders, yes, they would get a very large property tax bill, but then they would also lower all the other business taxes so that we collect exactly the same forever. So when you have a flat revenue line and rising expenses, the result is this. We're basically living off of our reserves. So if you were to take a look at our revenue graph over a period of time, it would look like a series of steps. And that's exactly what happens. We pass a levy, we come up here, then our expenses start rising. We get close to the two intersecting, we pass another levy, we build another step. And that's what school districts in this state have done since 1976. So,
Can you explain inside millage, please?
inside millage is under the Constitution where political subdivisions don't have to come to the voters for a vote for the tax rate. It's 10 mils, 1/10 of 1%. We have 4.8 mils of that. Our tax duplicate, which is basically all of the values of all the homes and all the businesses within the school district, rose by 10.61%. Our tax duplicate's roughly $1.6 billion. We realized $700,000. Amazon is not going to get us a whole bunch of cash, and neither is a very large home development. Inside millage does move with values, and we do see that particular revenue go up and down as property values go up and down, but that is a very small portion to the 62.1.
What is that percentage,
4.8 mils out of 62.12 mils. So whatever.
please? 62, total percentage the school board receives.
Of property tax bill?
But it was the total millage for the school board is how much?
62.12.
62%?
No, 62.12 mils.
I'm sorry, I meant those.
Yeah.
So has the district been fiscally responsible? What you're looking at here is how does Willoughby Eastlake taxes compare to other districts in our county? The average is 69.07, and our district is well below the average.
So those are effective.
Those are effective, millage, not your inside millage. Art.
It's your inside millage plus your drop in rates. As your property values go up, your rates come down, it becomes an effective mill. So the 62.2.12 are voted mills. So out of 4.8 inside mills, the total, including inside mills, is 62.12. The 59.1 out here is what are called effective mills. So what the county auditor does is as values rise, he takes that rate and creates a reduction factor. And then that tax rate's reduced so that the money coming to the school district stays exactly the same.
As a result,
With
House
the
Bill
exception of
920.
the inside millage.
Exception of those four. That's right. So we're in the middle of the pack. This is what we're spending per pupil Basically, all that is they just take your number of students and divide that by your total budget, and that's where you're at. We're below the average again, so we're well below the average in mills, effective mills, and we're below the average in expenditures. I get asked a lot of questions about medical coverage. I hear that consistently. What you're looking at right now is, this is by the Kaiser Foundation, public sector, the average public sector employee paying on single coverage pays $82, which is the first column. The second column is the private sector at $99 on average, and Willoughby Eastlake employees pay $102. In terms of family coverage, public sector's at $237, Willoughby Eastlake's at $363, and the private sector's at $462. So we're very competitive, and in fact, our teachers, our staff members pay more than all of our peers, to include fire and police. So what current and past cuts have been made? What have we done to reduce our budget? That might be a headline some of you remember, most don't, but that's from, the date on that is Thursday, September 29th, 2011. The staff, those of you that were around, remember that. I'm going to show you exactly what that means. Right? We cut 7 administrators, from North High School, 12.5 teachers and 1.5 secretaries. From South, 12.5 teachers, 1 secretary. From the middle schools, 17 teachers and 2 secretaries. From the elementary schools, 14 teachers and 3 clerical assistants and 5 custodians. For overall, 7 administrators, FTE is full-time equivalent. 7 administrators, 50 teachers, 7.5 clerical, 5 custodians, 7 food service, and what isn't reflected up there is every bus driver was outsourced, which is 72 bus drivers. What you're looking at here, it's smaller than what I had hoped. Sorry about that, but this is also, it wasn't just staff that we cut. We increased insurance contributions to the tune of a savings of $2.1 million. We did insurance plan changes, which was $2.4 million. Staff was on a step freeze and 0% pay increases. That saved the district $2.6 million. The staff took 3 days of non-paid. They worked 3 days and were not paid. Furlough days for $660,000 and $5 million in savings from cutting of staff. This was all done in 2011 and 2012, and those cuts have remained largely in effect. In fact, since then, we've even cut an additional 10 secretaries from our buildings on top of what you see reflected on our chart. So there is no low-hanging fruit. We are running as lean as we could possibly lean. Current budget cuts. So what did we do? We cut more. So this is what we cut already in effect for this school year. Supplies, computer purchases, curriculum subscriptions. We're no longer restoring our microfilming records, which we need to be doing. We moved technology purchases from the general fund to the PI fund. We canceled new computer equipment purchases. We canceled new maintenance equipment. We canceled computer cart replacements. We reduced building repairs and maintenance budgets. We cut building budgets by 15%. We eliminated public relations supplies. We cut textbook adoptions. We cut the superintendent secretary to part-time. We cut the operations manager position. And we cut a part-time purchasing agent. That's a total of $1.1 million in reductions are in place right now. So what would the effects of a November levy failure bring to the school district? You know, one of the questions, and I'll have you speak a little on this too, Bill. We get a lot of questions like, it's continuing. Why is it continuing and not time-bound? So So why isn't it another emergency operating levy? We have 17 emergency operating levies on the back that we have to renew over the next 20 years. 17. What's the cost of that? Well, on odd years, we have to pay to be on the ballot. Depending on who's on it with us, it's anywhere from $30,000 to $90,000. That's taxpayer money going to repay those. But that amount pales in comparison to what it does to our credit rating. As our credit rating declines, we presented 4 times at Moody's in Chicago, and what's the response? You want to talk a little bit about the response?
So when Steve and I, it's called an annual debt review, and they don't necessarily do it annually, but they do require that we be in person on those occasions. So when they review our financials, the first thing they look at, and the first thing Steve and I get questioned about, are the emergency levies. They consider those levies to be more risky because they are subject to voter approval every 5 to 10 years. Thus, our credit rating, for example, for our bonds that were passed, $115,750,000 in bonds, has nothing to do with the general fund, but that's what they look at for fiscal stability. Our credit rating is lower because of those emergency levies. So because of that, we pay a much higher interest cost back to the bondholders because of that. Those are real dollars that are outflowing from the school district back to the bondholders.
You can qualify much higher, too.
Well, it depends on the credit tier. You have AAA, then you have AA3, AA2, AA1, and you get into the single A's. For a specific interest rate, I'd have to go talk to the bond counsel. But there is a significant, it's not like you're going from 1% to 0.9999%. If you're off by a couple of tenths with a $115 million bond debt, that results into significant interest costs.
We share the
Millions?
Millions.
we share the 30 to 90,000 every time it hits with the other people on the ballot, or that's our cost?
That's just our cost.
That's just our cost.
So it doesn't matter if it's a special election, it doesn't matter if it's a general election, it doesn't matter if it's a primary election. It doesn't matter if it's a renewal, it doesn't matter if it's a bond, it doesn't matter if it's a PI, it doesn't matter if it's new. Regardless of the levy on the ballot, regardless of the date, in an odd number year, we pay. In an even number year, the Board of Elections pays.
So we're paying thousands of dollars to be on the ballot. Over the course of a bond issue, we're paying millions of dollars more in interest so that there's this sense of accountability of the school district. Well, I want to vote on it again in 5 years. I want to vote on it again in 10 years and hold the district accountable. Since the passage of these emergency operating levies, they've never not been renewed. So for this false sense of accountability, we're spending millions of dollars for that. I think that's mostly born out of not understanding that and not knowing the consequence. Police and fire are funded just like we are. Are they on time-bound emergency operating levies? No. Is the city on time-bound emergency operating levies? No. Just the school. And why that happened, I don't know. It happened before our arrival here, but that's why it's just not good business to keep putting emergency operating levies, time-bound levies, on the ballot. So what happens if we fail in November? The biggest reason you're going to see this number that you see, what is so important to understand, if we don't pass in 19, and in this before it turns to 20, if we don't pass in 19, then that means we spend 1 entire year longer in deficit spending. Which means if we were to make no cuts in November, pass in March, we would be back on the ballot 2 years later for new money again. And I would submit to you that there's no way we would pass another levy for new money 2 years after you just passed a levy. So that means we have to make cuts after November and hold those cuts in order to make that levy last longer than 2 years. What do you cut though? You saw what we cut in 2011 and 2012. there's not much left to cut. We'll take busing to state minimums. That means no high school transportation, and anybody, right now, anybody that lives over a mile from the school, we bus. It would move to state minimums, which is 2 miles. That would be in effect on January 3rd, 2020. We'd eliminate field and band trips, effective November 7th. Eliminate Soy High School at the end of this year. No Soy High School. Eliminate Crossroads, effective January 3rd, 2020. And you can talk to our teachers and they'll tell you the #1 challenge that we have in our schools is mental health. Eliminate middle school police officers. Eliminate all middle school athletics. Eliminate all non-district non-athletic supplementals. That means musicals, etc., etc. Clubs. Eliminate freshman athletic programs. Reduce travel and meeting expenses by 90%. Reduce instructional expenses by 10%. Reduce classroom supplies by 10%. Reduce dues and fee expenses by 10%. Sell Browning, Washington, Taft, and McKinley. That's $2.1 million. That's what's on the table, or what is recommended to be on the table to the school board should our November levy fail. Impacts of a March levy, and then we would be right back on the ballot, of course. Back on the ballot in March. This takes 2 slides. Eliminate all equipment purchases. Cap soy enrollment at 5th grade. Suspend the use of our mobile fab lab. Cut all family liaisons and supplies. Cut 5 guidance counselors, 1 at each middle school and 2 at each high school are left. Eliminate our entire music program in the elementary schools. Eliminate elementary and middle school art program and supplies. Reduce 2 assistant principals. Cut 1 curriculum administrator. An administrative pay freeze. Eliminate 90% of overtime. Increase class size ratios by eliminating 4 teachers. Eliminate the French program. Eliminate our Fab Lab teachers. Eliminate family and consumer science teachers. Eliminate middle school computer science teachers, 3 of them. Eliminate high school computer teachers, 2. Eliminate the following varsity athletics: swimming and diving for male and female, baseball, bowling for male and female, golf for male and female, softball, tennis for male and female. That's $5.2 million. Put it all together, that's roughly $8.5 million. And that was incredibly difficult to get to those numbers because we simply have no choice. That's how much money we need. And if that's I don't think that's what we want our school district to be, but it's in the hands of the voters.
So what happens if we don't ultimately pass a levy? The state will come in and they'll do it for us. They'll make those cuts and then some. And then the second thing that they will do, they will come to the residents and they'll say, pass a levy. Now, the levy millage is not going to be down here. It's going to be way up here because the state's not going to say, hey, get yourself to 0. Nope. They're going to recommend that you're way above 0. So the 4.99 that we're asking will be significantly greater. And if the state has to loan us money to keep us afloat, that has to be repaid. That requires additional millage.
Where are these recommendations coming from when you say this is what's being recommended to the board? Who recommended this?
The administration.
So you guys, that's not coming from the state?
No.
No,
No,
We-
it'd be worse from the state.
it'd be worse for the state.
We're still not at state
I know.
minimums. But
Yeah, I understand.
So what makes a vibrant community? Well, I don't think anyone would argue, or at least not firmly argue, that property values are linked to really essentially 3 things. What are your safety services like in your community? What are your parks and recreation like in your community, and what are your public schools like? And when they go down, so goes down property values. For most of us, our greatest investment we'll ever make in our life is our home. Families move here for the school district, so we have a great opportunity to grow our school district. We have beautiful facilities that will attract young families if we don't squander that opportunity. I know that our community has a lot of pride in our schools. Oh, no worries. We are educating the next generation of leaders. And often, roughly 30% of our community has a child in the schools. That's always pretty standard. 70% of the people, we need people that don't have kids in school to pay it forward, to pay for our youth just like somebody paid for them. Without it, we'd never hit the 50% mark that we need to pass the levy. So what will it cost? There was a lot of confusion and misunderstanding about what it cost. So this is, I'm going to let Bill explain this, try to keep it down to my level. So if I can understand it, everyone else will.
There were several social media sites that said it cost $499 per 100,000. That is not correct. That is absolutely 100% false. This is how you calculate it. You take the market value of your home. So let's make it simple, say 100,000 because that's the math. Now the state reduces that value by 35% to get to what they call an assessed value. That is what your tax is based on, your assessed value. You multiply that by your millage. Now your millage is basically $1 for every 1,000. So you take your 4.99, you divide it by 1,000 to get your 0.00499. You multiply that by 35,000, which equates to $174. Now, Steve referred to 1976, where House Bill 20 went into effect. The other part of that deal was income tax. The General Assembly at that time wanted income tax, the governor did not. So the deal made between the two entities was income tax takes effect for the state of Ohio, and every owner-occupied home gets a 12.5% reduction on their assessed value. Take the 174 and you multiply it by 12.5% to get the 152, or I should say 87.5%. You get the 152, and that's per year for every 100,000. Take that number divided by 12, that's your monthly cost. You take the 152 divided by 365, and that is your daily cost. So it's not $499, it's $152 more per year per 100,000.
Can I just say, is that posted anywhere on the web? On our district website?
It's on our levy website.
Okay. But I'm going to tell you, here's the problem. I'm sitting here and telling you, I do not have a Facebook account. There are plenty of people who do not have Facebook. They don't go into the levy thing, they don't look at Facebook. Something this simple for the common lay person to see needs to be posted on our district website.
I do have that.
Can you like make it so that people can type in their own market value? And
Sure.
come up-
Yes.
I
I
can
mean,
post
I
a
can understand
spreadsheet.
where they're maybe gonna put their wrong market value though,
That's
because
the
I
problem.
understand that that is, you
That's
have to go to the auditor's website to kind of look at.
Maybe give step-by-step instructions on what they should do.
We'll put a levy calculator, we've done it before, we can put a levy calculator on there. And I think that's good.
So for 42 cents more a day, we would,
So I wanted to make it even clearer. So he had his explanation, now here's mine. Per $100,000 of market value, that's $152.82 increase. That's $12.74 a month, or that's 42 cents a day. I know that's not insignificant. But if we're being good stewards of your money and we're running fiscally responsibly, I would ask that you give strong consideration to pitching in that amount of money. What can you do? Well, the future of the children sincerely is in your hands. You can support them or not. You can get involved in the levy campaign. There's a lot of things that we need help with. Remember, can we spend district dollars on a levy campaign? No. And those 17 levies on the ballot over the next 20 years, they all need flyers, they all need time and money. And it's very difficult to keep fundraising those dollars. Then people get frustrated and they say, well, I didn't get a flyer. My neighbor got a flyer, but I didn't get one. You're trying to hide it from me. No, I've only got $3,000 to buy flyers. I can't send them to every house. I don't have enough money.
It's illegal to spend taxpayer dollars. I cannot take a penny out of the general fund to send out flyers or anything with the levy. Steve and I can't even send an email from our school email. It's illegal. We have to privately fundraise, and those dollars are used to do all the campaigning.
So part of what you can do, it might seem insignificant, but doing something as simple as taking a street and hand delivering flyers for us is huge. It's huge, because otherwise we have to mail them, or we don't get them out at all. Well, next time we'll have coffee for you. And you can vote, and that's the most important part. The voter turnout from our parents and our own staff was low. And we need our parents and all of our supporters to vote. Too many people were apathetic and simply didn't vote. The future, that's kind of our tagline, their future is in your hands, and it couldn't be more true. Couldn't be more true. We have many examples of where we're doing exceedingly well, and the funding to continue that is on the line.
I mean, this is a big question, but it's kind of like, I know that you said that you get together with other superintendents. Why aren't we doing more to go to the state and ask them to stop trying to do what our state constitution says they can't do, is to make us have to keep footing the bill and people that can't afford it or whatever. So why aren't we getting our kids on board? Why aren't we going north and south and saying, you know what, kids, let's get on a bus, and let's get on the bus with Aurora City Schools and Solon City Schools, and let's go down to the state and let's march on the Capitol and do something about this.
See, part of I'm
And
not
are you
saying.
shooting yourself in the foot because then the state could say to you,
No.
well, guess what, we're not gonna give you your $82,000 or whatever.
No, I don't think that. I think the biggest challenge with the whole funding system, which has been held unconstitutional, not once, not twice, not 3 times, 4 times. It's gone to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has ruled that funding of public schools based on property tax is
Because other
unconstitutional.
states don't do this.
Some states
Other
do,
don't
some
even know what
states
levies
don't.
are.
Some states don't. But some states it's just, you're just taxed.
Yes.
But in Ohio, it is what it is. But part of the problem, why it hasn't been fixed, is what fix works for Willoughby, Eastlake, that fix does not work for Solon, which doesn't work for East Cleveland.
Which may not
There's
work.
certain districts based on poverty and wealth. That's the struggle. The struggle is between poverty and wealth. And how does the state do it? The wealthy district says, you're not taking our local tax dollars and shipping it off somewhere else. We're not paying for somebody else's education. If we want to spend $26,000 a student, which is what Orange School spends, they can do it. And they do it. And every time they hit $25 million in cash reserves, they go on the ballot. And they ask for more money. And you know what their community does? They give it to them.
And they're also AAA rated.
Yeah. Now, that's a different income level, generally speaking. than most communities. I'm not trying to say we should do that. I don't think that's good business
This is what's
personally.
happening at the
But-
state level is what you're
So
saying, so
Stacy-
everybody just puts their head down and says, eh.
There's no,
We gotta have,
Okay.
we're having a dialogue, we can let
Okay.
Mr.
You're
Bloodberg
right.
have a dialogue.
You're right.
We're
So
done having a
anyway,
dialogue. Talk to.
it's
see you
been,
later.
I'd love to sit down with you, but the challenge, I could talk about this all day, because it's frustrating, I think you can see our situation, and I just hope that you'll get involved, and I hope that you'll support our schools.
And I would say that Mr. Thompson's door is open, Mr. Parkinson's door is open. You know, this has not, this is also the first time the board has seen these recommendations, so, you know, the administration will come to the board and ask for approval of these things. So I know that there's someone in the audience who asked if we could change it from a continuing levy to an emergency levy, and we cannot do that. It's already been approved to be a continuing levy, so there's no way we can change that. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Can we find this presentation
So-
anywhere? I'm sorry.
Oh, we'll find it for you, Terry, at the end of the meeting, okay?
Thank you.
All right, thanks. So, whew, okay. We are now looking for the resolutions from the superintendent. Mr. Thompson?
The first order of business, Madam President, is item A, which is a WEDA memorandum of agreement. It is attached for your review. Item,
Wait.
that's special vote, yes, vote for that one, it's not
So
started.
you have heard the superintendent's recommendation that we approve item 5A, the WEDA memorandum of agreement. Is there a motion?
Madam President,
Mrs. Nance?
I make the motion to approve item 5A, WEDA Memorandum of Agreement.
Thank you, Mrs. Zern. Is there a second?
Madam President, I make a motion also to approve resolution 5A.
Thank you, Mrs. Krasinski. It's been moved and seconded that we approve item 5A, WEDA memorandum of agreement. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Parkinson, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Zern?
Yes.
Mrs. Krasinski?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Dr. Beal?
Yes.
Mrs. Warner?
Yes, motion is carried. Mr. Thompson?
Thank you, Madam President. Item B for your consideration is transportation bus stops. I will also ferret through that. I did have one question that I need to go through, but that is your general bus stops. And I'll get back to that individual.
Okay.
Item C for your consideration is special service agreements. We enter into these each year, and you can see the ones that are listed for your consideration. Very few students use these services, but when we need to, we want to try to find the best situation for our students. Item D for your consideration is billing, coding, medical assisting, and welding handbooks, and our LPN handbook. Those are just some examples of some of our incredible programs that we have for our high school students to participate in. Item E for your consideration is item from the personnel agenda. It is a supplemental for the brass advisor, and that requires a special vote.
Okay. Miss, you have heard Mr. Thompson, the superintendent's recommendation. We are looking for approval of item 5E, personnel supplementals for brass advisor. Is there a motion?
Madam President,
Mr. Jones?
I motion to approve item 5E, personnel supplementals for brass advisor.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Is there a second?
Madam President,
Mrs.
I will
Krasinski?
second that.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the item 5E, personnel supplementals for brass advisor. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Parkinson, will you call the roll?
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Krasinski?
Yes.
Dr. Beal?
Abstain.
Mrs. Zern?
Yes.
And Mrs. Warner?
Yes, motion is carried. Mr. Thompson?
Thank you, Madam President. Item F for your consideration is the personnel agenda. All those folks that are listed on the personnel agenda are subject to pending receipt of satisfactory records from the Bureau of Criminal Identification and Investigation, the Ohio Department of Education, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation before they permanent employees in the school district.
Thank you. We now move to item 6, the superintendent administrative guidelines. Any comments about those? We went from changing them to administrative guidelines
Yeah.
rather than policies.
Right, so the difference, it's a fine line, but the difference between a guideline and a policy, a guideline is written to implement the Board of Education's policies. So it's when there needs to be okay, we have this policy, how do we do it? And that's the difference between a guideline and a policy. Guidelines are written by administration. Policy is by the Board of Education.
Okay. And everybody have fun reading 165 pages of job descriptions. Ribbon?
That requires a separate vote.
No, it's not a vote, it's a second reading. It's just, yeah. We go to number 7, meeting notification. It says the next meeting of this Board of Education is on Monday, October 14th at 7 p.m. right here on the first floor of the Will B. Board of Education meeting at 35353 Chris Boulevard. We go to the consent calendar now, and I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Madam President,
Mrs. Zernan.
I make the motion to approve item 8A, adoption of the consent calendar.
Thank you, Mrs. Zernan. Is there a second?
Madam President,
Dr. Beal?
Second that motion.
Thank you, Dr. Beal. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the consent calendar item 8A. Is there any discussion?
Just to piggyback off what you were saying, was wondering if you can explain how much our expenses actually increased with special education and those costs, and that's one item that continues to increase, which impacts our bottom line.
Yeah, special education costs are, before I speak to that, I want to say that I was a special education teacher. That's where my heart lies. And I would just remind folks when we talk about the soaring cost of special education, and it is one of our fastest growing line items in our budget, the only thing I would pause and remind folks is any one of us could have a special needs child. And any one of us could have a child that's completely normal in your one bicycle accident or one automobile accident or anything else from all of a sudden having a special needs child. And I would submit to you that if any one of us did have a special needs child, you wouldn't care what the costs were. You would fight for the absolute best education and best care you could for that child. With that being said, some of our outsourcing institutions that may see a special needs child can be in the neighborhood of $70,000 or $80,000 per student. It is very, very expensive. But again, I think we all would exercise that option and that right if we thought it would benefit our child.
Anything else, Mrs. Zernan?
No.
Thank you. With that being said, that being discussed, I'm looking, I've got the motion, we have the discussion. Mr. Parkinson, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Zern?
Yes.
Dr. Beal?
yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Brzezinski?
Yes.
Mrs. Warren?
Yes, motion is carried. Is there anyone from the press here? Then I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
Madam President, can I make one statement?
I'm not looking for a motion to adjourn. Mr. Thompson would like to speak.
I just, while we're all here, I want the board to be aware of the incredible amount of work that our staff did and pulled together to get those buildings ready. We had noon aides cleaning, secretaries, fighting through box after box after box. We had the North football team delivering box after box after box. Mr. Avery, who's sitting in the back, did an excellent job of organizing. All of our maintenance people came in and moved boxes and helped set up. Cleaning, our cleaning crews worked, they worked over the entire holiday weekend. And if they weren't willing to do that, we would not have opened school on September 3rd. It is miraculous what happened between, say, Wednesday or so and September 3rd, the amount of movement on the facility. And I also thank AECom. I think they worked very hard as well, but it was on the backs of our employees, which is why that building opened on time. At one point, I was going to bring in an outsourcing company to help clean at $10,000 for the weekend, and our people said, no, don't do that, we'll do it. I was like blown away. How much dedication all of our staff kicked in to get those buildings open and clean. I'm grateful, and I just think you all should know that, and that should stay there publicly.
Thank you for sharing. And thank the staff. I mean, it's evident. If I was concerned, and I couldn't believe, I only saw one little section of South. I peeked through the door, and it was not so good. And the next time I peeked, I mean, there was everybody working. So it's a truly wonderful effort. And when I walked into North to sign that contract, I got goosebumps to see those kids.
It's gorgeous.
It's absolutely
It's gorgeous.
stunning. So
Nothing to talk about.
that brings us to the fact that the ribbon cuttings are next weekend. And we start at Longfellow. Oh, it's this weekend, goodness.
This weekend,
It's this weekend. Saturday. So we start at Longfellow and come to North and then go over to Union Village and South and the Senior Center and the Y. So if you haven't had the blessing of being able to be in them, please attend those things this weekend.
Are there walkthroughs?
Yes. We'll have cookies. Cookies.
So we're in the middle of a motion to adjourn this meeting. I'm looking for a motion right now. Mrs. Wojcinski. Thank you, Mrs. Wojcinski. Is there a second?
Madam President,
Mr. Jones.
I'd like to second that motion.
Thanks. It is moved and seconded that we adjourn this meeting. Any discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Parkinson, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Wojcinski?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Zern?
Yes.
Dr. Beal?
Yes.
Mrs. Warner?
Yes. We are adjourned. It is 8:24.